Welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, and transformational coaches being the change they seek in the world. If you'd like to be featured on our podcast to share what you're contributing to making the world a better place for us all, please go to www.jointheuworldorder.com. Be sure to like and follow our podcast for the latest episodes. Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast. I'm your host, Jill Hart, and today with us is Debbie Harrell. She is a life coach for humans questioning normal so they can show up authentically and intentionally and live a life of joy and purpose. Welcome to the show, Debbie.
Thank you, Jill. Happy to be here.
So we were talking about all the normal things in life, trash trucks, trains. How did you get started doing what you're doing? Why did you get started doing what you're doing?
Well, it's funny. 2019, well, actually several years prior to 2019, I had some life stuff happening, that I was very, I don't know if it was intentionally, but I was ignoring it. Like, oh yeah, all this crazy stuff is happening, but I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. And then I explained the end of 2019 is kind of a slow stumble. Like I was still standing upright, but I was about ready to fall flat on my face. And I had a friend tell me, Debbie, I've taken time off work for far less than what you've got going on. And I was like, wait, what? Come again? Like we can take time off work for ourselves? That's a thing?
Who knew?
So, yeah, who knew? Exactly. So I talked to my doctor and she's like, oh yeah, you definitely should probably take some time off. So got some time off from work, which spun me in a whole different direction, right? Because I am a good employee, a good little capitalist, and I'm not worthy unless I'm producing something. And all this introspection and working on myself isn't really producing anything. At least I didn't think so at the time. So there was a fair amount of not being very nice to myself in that process. But as I was getting comfortable with the idea, we're now in early 2020. We know what happened then, cue a worldwide pandemic, and now everybody is slowing down and freaking out. And I was like, oh, wait, guys, it's not that scary. It's not that bad. It's actually kind of fun. Like it's
I'm
kind of
ahead of
cool.
the
We learned
curve.
about we could learn about ourselves. Like, come on, come in, the water's fine. That kind of thing. And then I was quickly fascinated with this experience we were all having. The fact that it was this worldwide thing and what's going on, and everyone's freaking out about this quote unquote new normal, how terrible it is and how it's here to stay. And I was like, really, guys, was the old normal all that great? Like we were struggling with some pretty significant issues prior to this pandemic. So, and don't we have some say in what our normal is? Like, so I was on a walk with a friend one day and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start a podcast and I'll call it New World Normal. And at the time, I had no idea where it was going to go or what it was going to do, but I wanted to talk about this idea of normal, and I wanted to talk about personal responsibility, and I wanted to talk about creating a more, holistic, inclusive, environmentally friendly existence for us all. And so, yeah, that's how I got started.
Love that. It kind of dovetails with how I got started doing my podcast, and they're both takeoffs of the New World Order, which I'm sure we can both agree is like dystopian, and we don't want to have anything to do with it. We don't want that to be normal. But
No.
normal doesn't have to be the thing that we all were raised with, where you go to school, you're a good little student, you get A's because only, yucky people get anything less than an A. You're not like the best. And we're encouraged to value greed, which I listened to Stossel, I forget his first name. He did a presentation, I think it was a TV show even, it was on YouTube. My daughter was encouraged to watch it because the pandemic like shined a light on all these things out there that were uh, just broken. I don't know any other way to put it, but the school systems are broken, government's broken, judicial system is broken. It's just like it's all broken. You know, that was normal and we were comfortable with it. Um, but we're just trained to value things that really weren't productive for people. Like, you know, women and men, we have different bodies. Our bodies require different cycles in order for us to function comfortably in life. And the whole patriarchal capitalism, be a good little slave and go to work and pay for all the crap that you don't really need. Um, pay, thousands of dollars each month for a car that you can spend hours in because it takes forever to get to and from work, and never mind the environmental damage all that's causing. But it just like slowing down, allowing yourself to come into alignment with who you are and how your body functions. Because I don't know about you, but I'm past the change, but I still have long cycles. Sometimes during the month, I'm like really super productive. Other times, I'm like, just leave me the hell alone. I'm going to hole up here in the corner and I don't want to talk to anybody. Not that I'm
Yeah.
mad or anything. It's just, that's just how I am.
Uh-huh. No, and that's should be considered normal, right? We don't want to, or we're conditioned not to see that as normal, but it 100% is. I know, even talking about men and women's bodies being different, the all we know all the medical studies are mainly done on men. So like no wonder they can never figure out what's going on with the female body because they don't ever study it. Um, but then the idea of us slowing down, giving we have to give ourselves permission to do that first, right? In my story, it took a friend giving me the permission, and then I was like, oh wow, yeah, I can do that. And I find that comes up for me more and more, like I'm going to give myself permission to think about this differently, look at it differently, possibly do things differently. And the first thing that I feel like people should give themselves permission to do is do what you just said, slow down and tune in, because we don't ever even think about doing this. I was talking to a friend, and it's come up with clients many times. Well, what do you want from life? What do you want? Well, I don't know. You know, like people don't even know. Well, I can, chances are pretty slim of you getting to where you want to go if you have no idea where you want to go. So taking some time to figure that out, um, doesn't have to be exact, but just an idea. I know for me, when I first started, it felt so foreign and so uncomfortable. I had no idea. So I started identifying the things I didn't want. You were talking a little bit before we hit record, but like, I don't want to live in a world full of violence. I don't want to live in a dirty environment. I want to live someplace where there's clean air and clean water. So how am I showing up every day to contribute to that kind of world? So that's where it started for me. And then slowly but surely, as you learn more about yourself, you're paying attention, because it takes paying attention, and that's where getting intentional shows up. Well, how am I showing up? What are the decisions I'm making, and how is that impacting not just my life, but the world around me? And it takes being intentional, turning off the autopilot and thinking about it, which we don't often give ourselves the time to do that because we're conditioned. We have to keep going, 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 going. So I say a lot, in a world of more, 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 or that glorifies more, 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 what if you did less? What would that look like?
And giving yourself permission to have less. I don't like that term that was bannered around. You'll have nothing and you'll love it. Well, in some ways, it's a very evil thought because I think the way that it was presented was in that we're going to have everything and you'll have nothing, versus there's plenty enough to go around, only take what you need,
Mm-hmm.
versus you have to accumulate all this crap that when you die, somebody's going to have to throw it all out. Because let's face it, that's what happens. They're not going to want your crap. They're gathering crap of their own.
Yes, exactly. And that plays into that intentional living, right? Like the ideas you have, like I want to be friendly to the environment. So I'm not going to go buy that party favor that's made out of plastic that's going to end up in a landfill in 2 weeks. Look for quality products that are going to be used over and over and over again when you're buying gifts, maybe buy an experience, as opposed to some tchotchke that they don't really want. I live in a resort town, and so I get frustrated seeing people buy the tchotchkes. Like, your friends don't want the tchotchkes. Like, don't do it. Like, and also, it's a small community, and at our grocery store, um, they would run specials like buy 3, get 1 free. Well, I'm sorry, if my neighbor buys 3 and gets 1 free, and if 10 of my neighbors do that, now there's none left for me. And really, we all only needed 1 of the thing, but you've forced us to buy more so that we get this savings. So I get super annoyed with retailers and grocery stores. Why don't you just give me a decent price all the time, and don't make me jump through these hoops. Don't make me jump through these hoops of like buying 3, get 1 free, or download this app and cut out this thing and send this email. Like, so,
I
and like,
love
don't get me
that.
started on the Kohl's cash of it all. Like, no, I literally won't shop at Kohl's just because they do that. It's
Yeah.
easy. I don't shop much, but I'm like, I'm not going there because they do that cash thing. And I'm like,
I'm not a shopper either. And we have one grocery store in our town and they do the same thing. And I'm always, when I see those big sales, they have case lot sales twice a year also. Because we live in a community that believes in hoarding. Um, for lack of a better word. Though I do believe in being prepared. There's prepared and then there's ridiculous. Um, and most of the ridiculous goes in the landfill because you're never going to
mm-hmm.
eat it. People don't know how to do food storage in a way that cycles through the foods that you're buying. They just buy a whole bunch of food and think it's going to last forever. Trust me, it doesn't. Um, I forgot where I was going with that.
We can get on soapbox and fire it up on our tangents for sure. Well,
Yeah.
that's one thing that I got intentional about, is not having any food waste in my house. Is like eating everything in my refrigerator before I went and got more. It's eye-opening. It's hard to do at first. I'm getting much better at it. Um,
Husband and I are the same way. I was going around I waiting for the price to go up or the packaging to get smaller because that always happens right after they do the buy 4 now to get this special savings of 50 cents. Yeah.
yeah.
So wasting food is like, there's so many things, but you need to learn how to cook. People that don't know how to cook or recycle food, they struggle with food waste.
Yeah, people that are adverse to leftovers, which is mind-boggling to me, because that's my favorite thing, is to put all the leftovers in one meal, and I'm happy.
Smorgasbord. We do that a lot. And I recycle things that I make. Like I make some kinds of soups that can be turned into a pot pie later because it
Mhm.
stretches the leftovers. And if you're only cooking for 1 or 2 people, it makes it makes it more challenging to use up all of the food that you're bringing in.
But it's possible. Just got
It
to
is
try. Got to be
possible.
intentional.
You do have to be intentional. You need to be intentional when you're buying the food too. Like you don't need to buy 4 of everything. You know, pay the extra 50 cents, just get one.
Hmm.
If you're only going to use one, it really isn't saving you any money and it's just taking up space in your house and making you feel it makes me feel nervous when I've got a lot of crap around me and I live in a small space and so I don't want a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I just had to downsize from a 3-bedroom to a very small one bedroom with no storage. So it's been a challenge and I'm continuing. I just say the purge continues. Keep downsizing, getting rid of stuff. Sometimes it's hard because I tend to be sentimental, but I'm getting better.
You know, if you're not using things or you don't really want them, there isn't any need anymore to keep it around. I I say that, but I look at my daughter. She just moved into a 10 by 13 foot space. That's her whole apartment, including a bathroom and a kitchen.
Wow. That's some tiny living.
That's some tiny living, but she is so happy. We built her a loft bed, so she has all the floor space to use, but you have to be really intentional when you live in that kind of
Well, and I feel
enclosed
like,
space.
yeah, well, and I like to think I'm getting much better at not just the purge, what's going out, but about what I'm bringing back in. You know, do I really need that new pair of jeans? And it's so funny because this is way back when my son was probably about 5. You know, wisdom of children. We were at a store and he was in the shopping cart and I was looking at this blouse, deciding if I wanted to buy it. He's like, Mama, if you buy that, you're just going to have more laundry to do.
I
I
love
was like, oh
that.
my gosh, you're right. I think I'll put it back. Um, so yeah, do I really need that thing? And how long is it going to last? And is it going to end up in a landfill? And if is it going to degrade if it ends up in a landfill? Like lots of things that goes into it. But and that's where the tuning in, because that way of living might not be important to somebody else. But you don't know that until you tune in and decide what's important to you. And I used to be a super indecisive person. I can't say that I'm completely cured of that, but it is easier when you are clear on what your values are and the kind of life you want to live and the kind of world you want to live in. You can run it through all those filters. Well, is this decision taking me closer to those ideas or further away? Okay, decision made, you know.
I Yes, it helps when you slow down enough to understand what your own core values are. So many people don't really even know what their core values are. So they're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like ping pong balling through life. And, uh, oh, that sounds really good. Oh, no, that sounds really good. Oh, maybe this will work. And it's the frantic search for happiness when they don't even realize what happiness looks like to them. And I think normal should be you should be able to be you. And and you should at the very least like you.
Mm-hmm.
There are many people that don't like themselves. They may
Yeah.
say
Well,
they do, but they really don't.
well, and I feel like when you dig down, there's going to be aspects that you don't like. That's common. Like there's things about me that I don't necessarily like, but I don't just say like, oh, that's how I am. Deal with it. Like I recognize it, I honor it, and I'd make a decision. Am I going to work on that? Or, am I going to accept it the way it is? Um, but we are not often encouraged to tune in and take that time. In fact, we're probably conditioned to do otherwise. Like, no, you don't have time for that. You've got to do this over here. You've got to go to work. You've got to do this. You've got to do all the things that they say is what you should be doing right now, which often doesn't lead to, especially if you have kids, you're busy raising kids and you're going to all the PTA meetings and all the sporting events and all the, like, yes, it is a lot. Um, and how's that working for you? How are you feeling? How connected to yourself and your family and community are you actually? Because when you're so busy doing, there's really only time for more superficial connections because you don't know who you are. So how can you really know who somebody else is and make that connection and exchange? Hopefully that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And as women, I think, eh, well, I know from my own experience when I was younger and I had 2 kids and a husband that was gone a lot. I was expected to be the perfect wife. I was supposed to take care of the house, make sure all the bills were paid, take care of the kids, raise the kids, make sure that they got to school, make sure they were getting good grades, make sure they got to all the things. And I was expected to have a full-time job. Just like that doesn't work on any level. I'm sure why there was so much divorce in the 80s and 90s is because, people were recognizing this is not sustainable. No woman can do no woman can have it all. Men can have it all because they have wives and they were encouraged to have wives.
Well,
You
and
really
they're the one,
couldn't go up the ladder, the corporate ladder, unless you had a wife.
yeah. Well, that they can have it all because they're the ones that created all the systems, right? So like, yeah, of course they're going to create it so that it works for them. Doesn't really matter if it works for other people because competition was the most important and having more, and getting a leg up was more important than, lifting other people's up or making sure that we could all succeed and thrive.
Yeah, it was competition at its best. I
Mhm.
believe in coopetition, where you work on being competing with yourself to be the best you can be, and you work with others and you respect what they're good at and value what they're good at instead of competing with them over it. You don't have to be the best at everything. You just need to be the best at being you and
Mhm.
doing the thing that you're here to do rather than trying to like the whole treadmill of what we considered normal for so long just like gives me the willies.
I hear you. I often say, once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. So like there's no going back. You're like, I can't go there. I don't want
No,
to.
I
Like
would
I'm happy where
rather
I'm at.
go live in a cave, scrounge for my food, and cook over an open fire. If that was, if my choice was go back to the corporate world and all of that grind, or live in a cave in the middle of nowhere and have to fend for myself, I would pick fend for myself. That's how much the idea is just like, no, not that. Kind of getting older or just like it was such a terrible experience.
I say I'm unemployable. There's no way I can go back and work for somebody else because I'm too quick to call out the bullshit. Like, no, that doesn't look right. Like, why are you doing that? Don't you kind of feel like you're taking advantage of them by doing that? Like,
Yeah, exactly. I don't I don't really want to do that. I, and a lot of it was kind of dumb. I mean, shuffling papers around, filling out boxes and like from one basket to the next. I
I've had
spent a summer doing
existential
that.
meltdowns of like when you're driving through a city with all the office buildings and you think there are people in all those offices, or there used to be before pandemic. Now nobody's in the office, everyone's at home, but just pushing paper from one side to the other, from one inbox to the next inbox, like analyzing reports. Like, what is everybody doing? It's just mind boggling to me. Like,
And they could be
what?
home
Yeah.
playing with their kids, educating their kids,
Yeah.
sharing the experience that life is rather than trapped in a building
Making some shareholders wealthy
or
while they're barely surviving. Ah,
yeah, yeah. That was yeah. I
yeah.
quickly got into sales after that and I have lots of children and I have encouraged all my kids, do something that makes you happy and don't spend your life like just grinding for $1. It's not worth
Mhm.
it.
Yes. And that takes taking the time to know what makes you happy.
Yes. So you coach people on finding what makes them happy. And how does that look for you or for them? Is it
Um,
groups? Is it one-on-one? I know
I
you
do
have a
both.
community.
Yeah, I have a community that's an offshoot of the podcast that most of the stuff in there is free. It's just a way to connect. We do workshops. Um, Actually, I've been on kind of a hiatus this year because I had big, grand ideas for this year, but the universe and life had other things planned for me. So I'm regrouping now and getting things relaunched. Just relaunched my podcast, so I'll be rebuilding the community and those offerings. But we do book clubs, workshops, um, just connection, And then I have a small membership. Um, the people who want to show up intentionally, we do a thing called Dream and Plan Sundays, where we get dreamy about our week ahead and then actually plan for it. Goes back to, you're not going to get where you want to go if you have no idea where you're trying to get. So like get intentional about the week. Um, we also do some like new moon and full moon, a little more woo woo, but because you got to get dreamy and intentional. And then I do have an offering for a group program that I loved. It was a 12-week program. And I offered it last fall, was the first time, and it was great. I loved it. But then quickly realized that doing that traditional model of a launch and bringing a group cohort together really didn't work for my nervous system. So I've decided, you know what? I want to figure out how to deliver that one-on-one and group. So it'll be a little easier on my nervous system, but also support my clients wherever they are. If they want to do it as a group, if you want to do it as one-on-one, I have both ways to support you. I do believe that the group and community aspect does bring another layer of connecting with other people on the same path. So I'm still working that out, but it's coming. After the first of the year, I'll be launching a lot of new offerings. Really just wanted to get the podcast started this year. Um, but it's been very rewarding. Talk about doing something that makes you happy. Um, Especially since it was so quickly obvious, or it was obvious to me early on that most of us don't know because we've never been, I mean, we've said it several times in this conversation. We don't take the time. We're not given the permission to take the time. We're not encouraged to take the time. We're discouraged. We're conditioned like, you don't have time for that. You need to do this over here. And then we get to midlife or empty nest years and we're like, what the hell have we been doing all these years? This isn't what I thought it was going to be. Like, yes, I've had a great life, but why do I feel like it wasn't my own necessarily?
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that because you look back and you're like, hmm, how did that happen? It's kind of like you just got pushed along the stream and then suddenly you're at this point. Or maybe it's just because women are reaching midlife now and they're like, No, I'm done with that old stuff. I'm taking control of my life and I'm going to live it the way I want to live it. And if somebody comes along and they want to come with you, that's one thing. I've been married for 30 years. My husband's great. Leaves me the hell alone a lot of the time. He actively works to not make my life more difficult, which I'm very grateful to him for
Well,
because
and you probably do the same for him too, right? That's a
we're
good
both
thing
people that
in
need a lot of
partnership.
space in our lives, and we live in a small space, but we have times when we're together. We walk together every day. It's our time together, and then we go and do our own things. He's retired and I'm doing what I do, and it's just it works, but it works because it's intentional. It's not like we just showed up one day and decided, oh, we're gonna retire and I'm gonna continue doing everything for you. He was a truck driver, so I did when he came home, he was like, we waited on him hand and foot, did all his laundry, made all his meals. I just like all the things. He didn't have to do anything. But now that he's home all the time, he has to do stuff. I can't live his life and my life too.
Well, I
And
think, and I think that's a norm that also needs questioning. I feel like a lot of couples don't recognize that how much you need that independent autonomy, you know? Um, I was at a wedding recently And they both mentioned that in their vows. And I was like, okay, okay, I see you. Like,
You have a chance.
uh-huh, exactly. I didn't want to say that because, but
You talk about, two people becoming one whole. No. You're two people that are standing next to each other. You're not one anything.
and you got to be willing to grow together,
Yeah. And
and
it
allow the other person to grow. Maybe when you're not in a growth phase, but they are, like, support them, and don't I mean, I'm sure it's going to be uncomfortable and a little nerve-wracking, but trust that you guys are in this together. And then when you're going through your growth phase, they're going to be there to support you and encourage you. So I
be
say this, I'm
open.
single, but I, like, in theory, I think that's how it's going to work.
It does work that way. I've been married for a long time. I was in serial marriages. My first marriage lasted for 13 years, and I was divorced for 1 week, and I married my current husband, and we've been married for 30 years. I still have a good
Wow.
relationship with my first husband. He's the father of my first two children, and we see him every year. And I'm really proud of the person he's become. Not the person he was when I left him, but the person he's become is an amazing human being. And it's just, you've got to allow life to unfold. And if it unfolds with you guys together, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. Release, catch and release. I feel that way
I,
about relationships. Sometimes relationships aren't meant to last like forever.
I wanted to, you mentioned the word unfolding, and we've said several times about being intentional, showing up for your life. And I do think there is a balance there, right? Because life shifts, like I said, life had other plans for me this year. I had a definite plan and idea of what I was going to be doing, and I was making decisions to go that, but then everything got derailed. So you got to have that balance of what you think you're going to do, hold it loosely, because life might have other plans for you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're tuned into what your core values are, because you can still stay true to yourself and make those new decisions on the fly. Well, I thought it was going to go like this, but apparently it's going to go like this. So what does that mean? How am I going to redirect, regroup, stay true to myself and my goals and ideas for life? So I like that you
And
use that
and
unfolding.
embracing the mystery as it unfolds, because we can have intentions and set to manifest things, but often I've found in manifesting, it doesn't come the way I think it's going to come.
It
I
rarely does,
I
right?
always get what I set out for an intention, and I can say that always. I have lots of experience with this, but it never, and I do mean never, shows up in the way I think it's going to show up or looking the way I think it's going to look. Even if I'm really detailed about it, it's still a surprise. And I think that's what makes life so exciting. So no matter what you're doing, it's you have to leave room for life to happen.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I say leave room for the magic, but
Yes.
definitely hold it loosely, those
Mhm.
ideas.
Yeah. And I like your community where you're doing the Sunday gratitude, planning ahead. Part of manifesting, and manifesting is just creating your own life, because what we think about, what we focus on, what we feel about the situation is what creates our reality for us. And when you do it intentionally, but leaving room for the magic, you you look back on what's happened the prior week and with gratitude, even for the things that didn't go the way you expected them to go, to be able to find gratitude in those things just sets yourself up for so much more success in the following week, because you were able to look at the little things that taken on their own you might have gotten discouraged over, but you can examine them and say, well, but but they allowed this to happen. So it
Well,
might have seemed like a hiccup at the moment, but really it was to set me up for something better.
well, it's neurological too, right? Science
Mhm.
backs it up when
Oh,
we
yeah.
because we're constantly looking for evidence of the beliefs that we have. So if we're always believing in gloom and doom, we're going to find all the evidence that that's all there is. So if we're challenging ourselves to no, let's look for the glimmers and the hope, then we'll get better at finding those. So yeah, science.
So, yeah, it is totally science. And it's so amazing how much science is coming to the forefront on all of these things that were considered woo for so long.
Hmm.
It's not. I think woo is just science that isn't explained yet.
Well, I did see a TikTok last night. I wasn't fully engaged with it, but they were definitely talking about spirituality um, and neuroscience, like it being more scientific, and especially when you bring in the idea of quantum physics.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there's more people talking about that, which is fun.
And I love it. Because we are all connected. We don't
Mhm.
actually exist, and yet we do. We are all we are all part of the entanglement, and our thoughts create realities, but each of us has different thoughts, but those different thoughts meld together to create
Mhm.
something that's that we experience each of us differently as we continue on with the life path that we're on
And
in
if
this.
more of us could just recognize that we are all one
Yeah,
together,
yeah.
it would be a lot easier for us to get someplace. All this divisiveness and us and them and you. And I was thinking about this, right? Because we just had the World Series and everyone's recognizes how ineffective, I don't want to say bad, but like the us versus them during in political realms. Like we need to reach across the aisle and we need to learn how to work together. We can see that clearly, but then you watch something like a sporting event where this guy that likes this team, he's not even on that team. He just likes that team, is threatening bodily harm to the guy that likes this other team. And it's like, what the hell are you doing? It's literally a baseball game, people. It's not, nobody's going to live or
Because
die.
there's nothing behind it. I mean, these guys that are on these two teams, they're from all over the place. It's not like college football or college baseball or something like that, where, you're defending the honor of your school, which is really what it's all about.
Well,
That's what sports was supposed to be about. Instead, you've got these money-making machines, which is
mm-hmm,
really all they are
exactly.
anymore.
Exactly.
Um, they're designed to have advertising and charge gobs of money for the advertising, and don't even get me started on the
And it's
gambling.
one more way to keep us divided,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. As if
Uh,
politics wasn't enough.
exactly. Now
It's
we've got
like,
baseball too, or football. We're in
or
football season, right?
football.
Yeah, geez. Ugh.
My husband loves football, but he doesn't actually like watching the games. He just likes sifting through the data.
Oh,
Like
that's
he
fun. Is
he
he in
likes
like
the
fantasy football leagues? I always thought that would be fun
he's
because I'm
he
kind
is
of a
part of a fantasy
stats nerd.
football league. Um, he joined a fantasy football league with some really old friends of his, and he's such a data nerd. He's figured out how to dominate this game, and it was a really simple thing where he looks at an offense and a defense, because apparently I don't know anything about fantasy football, but he tries to
I know we're
explain.
getting out into deep waters now.
But there's a way to look at players or offenses and defenses, and pick players off of the team that's got the best this but the worst that, and you mix them together, and he just is like he's
Good at it.
winning all the games because he figured this thing out. But he
He's found his
finds
joy.
he the man loves spreadsheets. I mean, there's nothing that makes him happier than a bunch of data that he can stick in a spreadsheet and figure stuff out. We're such a
That's
dork.
awesome. That's
And
awesome.
it's so funny because my sister's an accountant and she's the same way. They both love cars, old 80s sports cars. They both love spreadsheets. Microsoft invited my sister to go and tell them how to make their spreadsheet Excel work really well because she's just like so good at it.
That's
She
impressive.
lived in Washington. Yeah, she's really impressive. And music, they love 80s and 90s music. They know all the musicians, all the songs.
It's
They're
fun.
so funny to listen to.
I love music, but definitely more for the feeling. Like I love going to concerts, um, and feeling that, but it's the connection,
Mhm.
right? It's that collective soul. We're all in this experience together and feeling it and so swaying. It's very ritualistic. I think about like, um, around the campfire when they were dancing and swaying and
Mhm.
chanting and drumming, all that kind of stuff. I feel
Yeah, the
like
energy
I
is
feel it
very
like that.
powerful.
Yeah.
I went and saw the Beach Boys, God, a million years ago in the stadium in the Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego after a baseball game. And it's a concrete amphitheater was. I don't even know if it exists anymore, but the whole thing was vibrating just from the people stomping their feet and just like the energy was amazing.
I had a similar experience at Anaheim Stadium, where the Angels play in
Mhm.
California. It was in the 80s, and it was Madonna. And
Mhm.
the one level and it's concrete, but you could see it flexing. I was like, oh, I'm glad I'm not under that because that looks scary.
Yeah. You don't think of concrete as being able to move, but I think it's just the energy of the people
Well,
in
and I
the
think it is meant to
experience.
withstand, especially in California, because things
Yeah.
move here sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. It was, yeah, just the energy is like so amazing in different places. We've wandered way off.
We have covered lots of topics I didn't expect to, but that was fun. I like it.
So how do people get in touch with you?
I hang out on Instagram more than I probably should. The New World Norm. And yeah, get on my newsletter. I'm going to be better about sending out a newsletter I'm not going to do weekly. I just can't bring myself to do that, but I will do monthly and then regular updates on different things going on. I do make a point to have a lot of free offerings because I always want this kind of work to be accessible. I think it's really important that we're connecting in that way and lifting each other up whatever way we can. So yeah, that's how they get in touch with me. And also go check out my podcast.
Ah,
I mean,
the
obviously, if
new
they're
world
listening to this
normal.
podcast, yeah, we both took a
I'll
play.
actually put a link to it. Are you on like all the places?
Yep, yep, yeah. I just relaunched this week, so pretty excited about it. I've got a fun mashup episode. I was like, I think I might do more of those. I could just have little snippets from different episodes.
Mhm. I like that idea.
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
yeah.
So this has been an amazing conversation, Debbie. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Been a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's the one thing you hope the audience takes away from our conversation?
What's the one thing? I narrow it down from all these different things we've talked about, but I feel like what's been most important to me, and I hope that other people will give themselves permission to do things differently and look at their life differently, and especially give themselves permission in a world that glorifies more and more and more, to give themselves permission to do a little less and to tune in and to get them know themselves.
I love that. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Thank you for joining us for the U World Order Showcase podcast. Remember, if you would like to be featured on this podcast as a life, health, or transformational coach, please visit www.jointheuworldorder.com. We look forward to talking to you next time as we present another life, health, or transformational coach being the change they seek in the